Alrighty. Well, thanks for joining, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started. This webinar will be recorded, so if at any point you guys have to drop, feel free. We'll be releasing the recording for it too. And then other people that didn't get a chance to join will also be able to review it as well. So before diving into things, a little bit about me. I am Jeremy Wallace. I'm a Microsoft Certified Azure Solutions Architect. And Microsoft Certified Trainer, MCT. I'm the Principal Cloud Architect for Safari Micro and was recognized as the top cloud computing voice on LinkedIn. I've been working in the Microsoft Cloud for over a decade, having migrated thousands of users to Microsoft 365 and Azure. And I thoroughly enjoy educating organizations to understand the Microsoft Cloud technologies better in the cloud. If you're ever looking for free tips and tricks and advice regarding Azure and the Microsoft Cloud, I invite you to follow me on LinkedIn and on the MS Cloud Bros and Safari Micro YouTube channels. All right, so I'm here to overview and demo our Azure Virtual Desktops, or AVD, as a service solution called SafariDesktop. So I say as a service to match the concept of infrastructure as a service or software as a service. So for instance, Microsoft 365 email is email as a service. You don't need to build, update, or backup email servers of any kind. Microsoft handles all of that for you. You just enjoy the email. And along the same lines, I'm here to talk about Azure Virtual Desktops, also called AVD, which you can go out and build yourself right now. But I want to talk to you about AVD as a service where you get to enjoy all the benefits of AVD without worrying about the building and managing and supporting that AVD environment. But first, to talk about this, I need to make sure everyone here has an understanding of exactly what Azure Virtual Desktops is. So I'll walk you through Azure Virtual Desktops. This is Microsoft Cloud VDI solution. So AVD brings a full-featured Windows 11 and still Windows 10 desktop experience to you virtually, anywhere with an internet connection from nearly any device. So Windows, Mac OS, iOS, Android all have an application that can be used to access your virtual desktop. But you can also access them through an HTML5 capable browser. So in other words, Chrome, Firefox, Safari, all the modern browsers, you can access your virtual desktop from. This enables you to access from corporately owned computers, personally owned devices, including phones and tablets, and even shared devices. Another option is you can use inexpensive thin clients to connect to your virtual desktop, allowing you to spend only $200 to $400 on a device instead of $1,000 to $2,000 on a device. Most of the commonly used thin clients all support connecting to an Azure Virtual Desktop. I've also seen people use devices that aren't necessarily made to be a thin client, such as like a Chromebook, but they've used it effectively as a thin client to connect to Azure Virtual Desktops. I've picked up a Chromebook for $100 and used that to connect to an Azure Virtual Desktop before. So really from any device, anywhere with an internet connection. So that does enable you to do things like bring your own device strategies, or even use your existing hardware that you have. Say everyone in your company is due for a hardware refresh. Well, instead of buying all brand new devices, you can repurpose those existing devices as a thin client, essentially, to connect to your virtual desktop and give them a brand new virtual desktop on the back end that is constantly evergreen and maintained. One frequent and common piece of feedback about AVD has been that out of any virtual desktop solution, so think VMware Horizons, Citrix, remote desktop services, AWS workspaces, it's AVD's Windows 11 experience that most closely matches that of a local desktop experience you have on your laptop. And the key to that really is the fact that Microsoft built Azure Virtual Desktop technology for Microsoft Azure, their cloud platform, and Microsoft built Windows. In fact, they built a special version of Windows designed specifically to run on AVD within Azure for this very purpose, something other virtual desktop solutions are unable to do. They don't own the products. You want a great virtual experience with Windows, then a native Microsoft solution is what's going to bring it to you. So unlike Windows on your local laptop, these virtual desktops, they live in Microsoft Azure Cloud data centers. And I want to demystify the idea of the cloud, especially for many of the older generation of technology users. The cloud can sometimes be thought of as some unsecure public internet space that MySpace and MSN Messenger and AOL and people using Napster and LimeWire are at. That's not the cloud. In fact, the Microsoft Cloud is an impressive behemoth of computing power fortresses that we call cloud data centers, and a massive private dark fiber, and that's a privately owned, not shared with anybody, dark fiber network that connects all of these Microsoft data centers. Microsoft has built this out all over the globe. And because of this, Microsoft owns and runs one of the largest backbone networks in the world, which you can see represented in this global animation that's playing on my screen right now. In the United States alone, there are a multitude of these Azure data centers, each a highly secure fortress of advanced computing. And if you were to submit an application for physical access, because you can't just walk into one of these data centers, I'll pull up an image of one of these data centers here. If you were to submit an application for physical access to it and somehow given clearance to enter one of these buildings where they have key card and biometric door access, camera tracking, and time room lockdowns, you would see these massive rows of racked servers. And on these massive racks of servers and these highly secure fortresses, that it's here that you can build entire virtualized environments for your organization through the magic of Azure orchestration. And that's all done through the Microsoft Azure portal, tied to your organization's Microsoft 365 tenant, and that's where you build these Azure Virtual Desktops. That's where you can go and actually build an Azure Virtual Desktop environment right now. As I mentioned before, this virtualized Windows 11 experience, and again, you can still do Windows 10 virtualization as well. It differs from other virtual desktop solutions in that Microsoft built it for the cloud and built it to have a better experience with Windows. But it also built it to have a better experience with Microsoft 365 applications and services that other VDI solutions aren't capable of doing, because, of course, Windows and 365 are Microsoft products, and Azure Virtual Desktop is their technology. So they have the power to create synergy between these. For instance, the Microsoft Teams telephony and conference call performance on AVD makes use of multimedia redirection and other enhancements in AVD that eliminate the delay in audio and video that other VDI solutions are often notorious for. And also because AVD exists on Azure Cloud Backbone Network, it can communicate with Microsoft 365 services such as OneDrive and SharePoint and Exchange Online without having to traverse inefficient public internet routes. Instead, staying on that Microsoft Cloud networks, that dark fiber backbone that we saw in those other images, and it gains an increased performance from Microsoft 365 services from your virtual desktop. The way you connect to your virtual desktop is also different from other VDI solutions. A lot of other VDI solutions, they want you to open up a connection point into your network in order to get to that VDI solution. There's no opening up inbound ports needed for this. It uses something called reverse connect technology. It's very similar to a web proxy technology, if you're familiar with that. But essentially, it's all outbound traffic. So when you click to open up your virtual desktop, it tells Azure from the host side, the Azure Virtual Desktop host, does an outbound TLS encrypted connection to something called an Azure Virtual Desktop Gateway. And then from your computer, there's an outbound TLS encrypted virtual desktop connection to that same AVD gateway. And then it creates a full connection, and you have your window into your virtual desktop from there. And so that's all TLS secure, just as if you were to go to your banking website and you have an encrypted web connection to your bank's website, you have an encrypted TLS connection that's all outbound to your virtual desktop through that reverse connect technology. And because virtual desktops itself, all of the data on the virtual desktop exists securely in Microsoft Cloud data centers and not on the device you were accessing it from. Your device can get lost, stolen, broken. There's zero concern about corporate data being lost or compromised. You simply hop on a new device, even if it's a library computer or your tablet or your phone, and you can continue working where you left off Even the session, I could be on my computer right now connected to a virtual desktop, and that virtual desktop I could have Outlook open. I could be in the middle of writing an email, and say my coworker Sean comes up with a giant sledgehammer and smashes my computer right in front of me. I could pull up a web browser on the next computer that's next to me, log into that same virtual desktop. That same email is still open, and I can continue working without missing a beat, because none of that data, none of those applications are running on the device I'm accessing it from. All of that's in the cloud. And so it makes it less of a worry if anything happens to the device itself, especially if you can get thin client devices, cheaper devices to access it. They're just throwaway devices. They're just a mechanism, a window into the cloud where your data is and lives securely. The beauty of being a cloud VDI solution as opposed to some on-premise VDI solution is the power of the Microsoft virtualization technology in the cloud to create virtual machines of any size. So you can have very lightweight workloads. We have clients that are using virtual desktops just to access browser-based applications, and not really a lot of computing performance needed. But we also have clients that are doing heavy GPU workloads. They're doing AutoCAD work. They're using video editing work, all from their virtual desktops. And we can provide both the lightweight and the heavy workloads. And we can even transition between those workloads just like that. It is very quick. Say all of your workforce needed to upgrade their performance tomorrow. We could do it without missing a beat, because that's how Azure Cloud Technology works. We can resize virtual machines. We can resize computing power like it's nothing, as long as it's available there in the size that you need, which Azure can have cloud computing, super computing level power that's out there. It just depends on how much you want to pay, really, for that power. There's also this little benefit of being able to lock down your virtual desktop. So like I mentioned, the device you're accessing from, you can do like a bring your own device strategy. Say you wanted to let people in your organization just use their home computer, their laptop, their tablet, even their phone. And you can secure your virtual desktop if you're worried about the information that's being accessed on the virtual desktop itself. If you're worried about that being compromised by the devices that are accessing it, you can prevent the copy and pasting of data. You can lock down the clipboard. You can prevent access to local drives on the local computer, so that there's no way they can transfer data from the virtual desktop itself to the device that they're accessing from. So especially if you're working with sensitive data sets, workloads, and you don't want there to be a chance for anybody to steal that information or take that and throw it on the thumb drive, you can lock that all down on the virtual desktop. The only way they can interact with that data is to log into the virtual desktop and use the virtual desktop, which there's a record of. They can't take that data out of it and put it on their tablet or their home computer. So you do a bring your own device strategy without the headache of that. Also, if say that device that they're accessing from is fully compromised, say it's somebody's home computer, they have viruses on it, say there's even a screen capture mirroring attack that's happening on that computer. So somebody is actively looking at screen captures of that accessing device, that laptop that they're accessing from. Well, you can actually lock down the virtual desktop itself to be protected from screen capture technology. So even if the screen's being recorded or screenshotted, it's not going to show up in that software. They're just going to see the background of the computer itself. They're not going to see that virtual desktop. And even when that's enabled, the user themselves from within the virtual desktop, they can still hop on Teams meetings, share out their screen from within the virtual desktop. It doesn't harm their productivity at all. It just protects them, protects the virtual desktop itself from whatever device is used to access it. So really, you don't need to worry about the device being used as that portal to your virtual desktop. And that's why you can confidently look at a bring your own device strategy. You also have access to what's called confidential computing in Azure, so you can protect these virtual desktops all the way to a highly secure lockdown situation. So you can see kind of on this table here some of the benefits of confidential computing. What confidential computing is, it helps you protect your data while it's being processed in the cloud using a hardware-based trusted execution environment, or TEE. This encrypts your data in memory and verifies the cloud environment before processing anything. So this way, there's no way anyone can see or access or tamper, including users, administrators, or even Azure itself. It's all encrypted and locked down. So you have the benefits of it: robust hardware-based isolation, customizable attestation policies, cloud-based confidential OS disk encryption, flexible ownership of VM encryption keys, secure key release with cryptographic binding, dedicated virtual TPM for attestation and key protection, and then similar to trusted launch for Azure VMs. So if you have environments that are running PII or PCI or financial data sets or any other HR, whatever the data sets that you're running into that have some type of compliance level in it, you can make sure that your virtual desktops are meeting those compliance standards and are locked down to even Azure itself from being able to access that data that's what's inside the virtual desktop itself, even that's in active memory. So you can get as secure as you want with virtual desktops. With that said, I'm gonna pause on this presentation part, and we're gonna take a look at virtual desktops themselves. I'm gonna share my screen, and we're gonna hop and take a look at virtual desktops from the native application, from the browser-based application, and then I'm gonna even screen share my phone here and show you from a mobile device as well. So, as I mentioned before, available on Windows, Mac OS, Android, and iOS is a native application called Remote Desktop. This application is different from if you've ever used like RDP Remote Desktop to access servers or things remotely. Different application, also called Remote Desktop. I understand that it's a bit confusing. But inside this program, you can subscribe to your virtual desktop workspace by signing in with your Microsoft 365 credentials. So I am subscribed here using my jeremy.wallace at safarimicro.com Microsoft 365 credential. On Azure Virtual Desktops, I'm assigned to a specific virtual desktop group, and you can see I'm actually assigned to multiple of them. So if you have different departments or you have certain users that have multiple roles, you can build out different virtual desktops that accommodate those work role workloads and give them access to multiple of them. So I'm going to connect to standard desktops. We'll see if it pops up here. So we have a conditional access policy in Safari Micro for our Azure Virtual Desktop environment to shorten the life of the token. There we go. Of the authentication token for virtual desktop. What that means is we try to make sure that anytime they launch the virtual desktop, it's going to prompt them to verify their Microsoft 365 credentials. And the benefit of that is because we're also having them use multi-factor authentication to verify their identity. So you can protect these virtual desktops with multi-factor authentication through Microsoft 365. And let me enter. So that was the first authentication piece. So that ensures that I have access to the virtual desktop itself. That's just to make sure that I have that authorization. This next part, this credential, is actually signing into the virtual desktop itself. So think of this as when you boot up your computer and Windows asks you to sign in with your password. That's what this is. This is the Windows sign in. Boom, I'm in my virtual desktop right now. So this is I can unmaximize it. So this is my Windows 11 Azure Virtual Desktop that's in the cloud. This particular virtual desktop sits in the West US 2 Azure Data Center region. So this is actually up in the Seattle area of the United States. I'm down in Arizona and a really good performance, even though I'm in the south part of the Western United States, and this is in the north part of the Western United States. And for all intents and purposes, this is the same Windows 11 experience that you would have on your laptop. So for the most part, all the applications that you can install on your laptop, you should be able to install on an Azure Virtual Desktop. There are some nuances when you talk about multi-session or private virtual desktop, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Some applications don't support a multi-session environment. Again, I'll kind of explain what that is. But everything, the behavior of Windows 11 inside this virtual desktop experience is pretty much identical to my own laptop. And the profile that I connect to, some VDI solutions, when you log into a virtual desktop, they have to rebuild your profile every single time. And so you have to re-sign into things like Office applications, set up Outlook, re-download all of your emails. This is a persistent virtual desktop profile. So every time I connect to the virtual desktop, I'm already still signed into all my applications. I don't have to re-sign into them every time. The data that I have stored on my profile is still there every time. And we use something in Azure Virtual Desktops called FSLogix profile containers that help do this. And again, I'll talk about FSLogix profile containers here more when we talk about some of the technology behind AVD. So depending on how you have your virtual desktop set up, you can have more than one of them open. If they're using the same FSLogix profile, you can't. So I'm connected to another virtual desktop here. So I can have multiple open. This one is actually slightly different. This is a cloud PC, Windows 365. We also support doing that, and we could talk about Windows 365 more in a bit. I wanted to hop on this one because this one's located in my Arizona region, and I wanted to show you the speed test here. When you have a virtual desktop, you can see starting in Azure. When you have a virtual desktop in Azure, it's using that Microsoft backbone. And since I already have this open, I may have to refresh this. This may time out. Yeah, let me refresh this. What that means is that any of the internet browsing that you do from your virtual desktop is going to make use of that super speedy Microsoft dark fiber backbone network. And so the bandwidth that's available from Azure in that Azure data center is going to be the bandwidth that you experience from your virtual desktop itself. So when you look at the crazy amount of numbers that you see on the bandwidth here, that's because that Azure region, that data center that you're in, has those type of bandwidth speeds, and so you get to make use of that. Now that can vary from Azure locations all across the world. So don't expect every single Azure region that you build to have the exact tremendous amount of bandwidth, but nearly 95% of the time, it's going to be better than the bandwidth that you have in your local office network or your home network. So that is, again, another great benefit of working in Azure is the fact that you get to use Microsoft's networks for all of your internet, your video viewing media. If you wanted to stream videos off of here, you can do it because you have the bandwidth for it. And none of what happens inside this virtual desktop here, as far as the streaming and bandwidth and all that, that's not clogging your own networks. That's happening from the virtual desktop. Now, there is some bandwidth considerations of viewing your virtual desktop. Again, the fact that I'm looking at my virtual desktop, there's some bandwidth involved in that, but it's not nearly anything that you're doing from the virtual desktop itself. Now, I'm going to hop over to Chrome. So this is a Chrome browser. I'm signed in to my Azure Virtual Desktop remote desktop web client. I'm signed in using my Microsoft 365 credentials. That's same jeremy.wallace@safarimicro.com. You can see essentially the same type of published layout. I have access to my standard desktops and all the other virtual desktops that I'm assigned here. So I'm going to access it. You can see it's going to ask me if I want access to clipboard, printer, file transfer. So you can even do that from the browser. Again, if that's stuff you want to lock down in the environment, you can. So you can completely disable any of this from showing up for the user if you don't want them to be able to transfer files or copy and paste in and out of the virtual desktop. So I'm going to launch it here. I'm already signed in on the Microsoft 365 side. So this prompt that's going to come up here is just for signing into the virtual desktop itself. So this is going to be the Windows authentication that pops up eventually. Probably because I'm still signed into the virtual desktop, but I did want to show what it looks like when you are signed into the virtual desktop and you re-sign into it from a new device. Actually, let me just refresh this since I had that open. Oh, that's a problem. It wanted me to re-authenticate. It's really so again, this location, just the sign into this area is MFA protected. That's using your Microsoft 365 credential. So you can see that that was locked down with MFA. I access my virtual desktop again. So this is the Windows login, which it's all the same password. It's the same unified identity. So with the virtual desktops, you're using that same password through the Microsoft 365 side and the Windows side. So you can see here when I connected to the virtual desktop within the browser, it just disconnected me from the client side. So it says you have been disconnected. Another connection was made. So it'll just exit that. But the applications that were already open, exactly what was open before was open here. So I can easily switch devices between the native application, between the browser application on multiple devices, and still just leave what I had open and continue working. So that's a huge benefit. This this is limited to a browser window, of course. So I could stretch this across multiple screens, but it's not going to quite function the same as the native application. The benefit of the native application is the fact that it can use all of your screens if you have multiple of them. Normally, I work from a 3-monitor setup, and so my virtual desktop can spread across all 3 monitors, and I can snap things to each monitor and work natively like that. So there's increased benefits of using the native application over the web application. But this web application is still good enough. We've had clients that work from the web application on a daily basis. I'm also going to show from a phone. So I'm going to connect to my my Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra. It's a little bit of an older Samsung phone. There we go. So I'm remoted in. I'm going to open the RD client, same type of native client. Again, I'm logged in with my Microsoft 365 account on it, and we see those same desktops available to me. So same experience no matter what device I'm accessing from, or if it's the browser. Again, I have access to clipboard, or if this is locked down from the admin side, I won't get the ability to select these. Let me connect. And then this is my Windows credential. All right. Same desktop that I was logged in on the browser and on the native Windows client. Outlook is still open here. I just resized it for my phone. I have my phone physically, so I'm going to turn my phone. If I turn my phone on the side here, it goes to the landscape layout. So I can work completely from my phone, same virtual desktop experience, all the benefits of Windows 11 from my Android phone, same experience on iOS. If you have the RD application installed on it, you're going to see that same published window, access your virtual desktop the same way. So any device, tablet, phone, HTML5 capable browser, desktop, laptop, you can use any of them to access your virtual desktop. The phone, what I like to tell people about the phone is I actually worked from my phone several times from the virtual desktop. In fact, I have a post on LinkedIn where I took a picture of me using my phone mounted on a little stand with a Bluetooth mouse and keyboard from a plane. I was on a plane ride, a 12-hour plane ride to Japan. So I'm over the Pacific Ocean using the plane Wi-Fi, logged into my virtual desktop or working from the virtual desktop there from my tiny little seat because I couldn't pull up any other devices. I was already cramped on that ride as it is. So I was able to do stuff from my virtual desktop, even from an airplane Wi-Fi on my little mobile device. But there's other people that have used an HDMI dongle and connected it to their mobile phone, and they take that HDMI dongle, hook the other end to a monitor. They use a Bluetooth keyboard and mouse, and now they have a full-size virtual desktop experience with Bluetooth mouse keyboard to do their work, and all they're carrying around with them is a mobile device. Be walking around with a laptop or a desktop tower in your hands. So again, that is one of the greatest benefits of Azure Virtual Desktop is work from anywhere, any device, and transitioning from one device to another is seamless. All right. So let's go back over to, and you can see this was the browser. Same thing, it just told me I connected on another device, so I could reconnect back here on the browser, and it would pull my session back into here. Go back to the presentation here. All right, so you've seen the benefits of Azure Virtual Desktop. You've seen it work live. Let's talk a little bit about the technology behind it in the background here. Let me load this presentation back up and get to where we need to. So to understand the value of AVD as a service, it's best to have an understanding of what it would take to build your own AVD environment and the cost to run it and maintain it and support it. So I'm a Microsoft certified trainer. I actually do have videos out on YouTube for the AZ-140 Azure Virtual Desktop Specialist certification. And as a part of that, you learn how to build and implement your own AVD environment. So I'm actually going to give you right now a free AVD architecture plan that you could go out and use to build your own AVD environment. We're not trying to hide Azure Virtual Desktop technology. Azure Virtual Desktop is something you can indeed go and build yourself right now today. But I'm going to show you the kind of the complexity behind that and the benefit of having an as a service solution like SafariDesktops. So if you're currently on Microsoft 365 today, you have a Microsoft tenant. Let me grab some water. There's a piece of it called Enter ID, and that's where your user identities and groups are stored, and that's all connected to Azure. So if you have Microsoft 365 currently, you have an Azure presence through the identity platform. If you were to build an AVD environment, the first thing you would want to do is add an Azure subscription to your tenant. So this is basically just a cost vehicle that allows you to build whatever you want virtually and pay for it on a monthly basis. So you can build virtual machines, build a storage account, whatever you want. And it generates an hourly cost that gets billed toward this Azure subscription that you have to pay for on a monthly basis. So if you were to go out and try to build an Azure Virtual Desktop environment right now from scratch, the first thing you're going to want to do out there is build a virtual network with a range of IPs associated to it. And then you're going to carve out a subsection of that IP addresses called a subnet, and that's where your virtual desktops and other virtual machines are going to live. But you're also going to want to be able to sign into your virtual desktops like you just saw me do using your corporate username and password. So you saw that I signed into my virtual desktop with my jeremy.wallace@safarimicro.com. Same thing, same password that I used for my Microsoft 365 credential. So you want that single sign-in functionality. So you're going to need some type of domain services inside Azure. So most companies, they already have something called Active Directory domain services in their office. So you say, okay, I want to use that domain services. I already have a login for my local computer. I want to use that same login to access my virtual desktop. So now I need to connect my local network, my office network, to Azure. How do I do that? Well, you would build out another subnet called a gateway subnet. You would deploy something called a virtual network gateway, and then you would set up a site-to-site VPN from Azure to your local network. And so now Azure's connected to your office. Then you would build another subnet inside Azure, and you would stand up a virtual machine. You join that virtual machine to your current Active Directory, and you would promote that to a domain controller, and boom, you have domain services inside Azure. And so now you can build other virtual machines that are all joined to that same Active Directory, and you can log in with your corporate username and password that you do for your current corporate laptop. So now for the actual Azure Virtual Desktop part, you want to build something called a workspace, an app group, and a host pool. And if you were building multiple AVD environments for, say, different departments, you would build multiple host pools and app groups, say one pool for each department. And you're now ready to deploy what we call AVD hosts. These are the actual virtual machines that users will connect to for their virtual desktop experience. All right, so you think, oh, this is easy enough. I want 10 people to have virtual desktops. So I'm going to build 10 virtual machines, each running Windows 11. Let's give them 4 vCPUs and 16 gigabytes of RAM. That sounds reasonable. And so, great, you're in business. You assign 10 people to the app group, and those 10 people can indeed reach their 10 virtual desktops. But at the end of the month, you get a bill and you realize you paid $284 for each virtual machine to run the entire month, which means for 10 people, you spent $2,840 that month for their virtual desktops. And if you wanted to stick 100 people on there, you were going to pay $28,000 a month or $340,000 a year. Well, that's ridiculously expensive for virtual desktops. That's not what we want. And the beauty of Azure Virtual Desktop is how you can bring costs down while still delivering performance for your virtual desktops. And one of the ways that is unique to Azure Virtual Desktop is doing that through something called multi-session. So Microsoft built a special edition of Windows 11 and Windows 10 designed for multi-session capability that allows you to connect multiple people to a single AVD host. And each user would still have their own individual virtual desktop and unique profile experience, though in the background, they were connected to the same host. So instead of assigning one person a private virtual desktop, where they're the only one using the host, we can maximize the utilization of resources by giving them an even bigger host in the background and then connecting multiple people to it. So instead of paying $284 per virtual machine for 10 virtual machines, equaling $2,800 a month, I can pay $608 for one virtual machine that has even more resources, 8 vCPUs, 28 gigabytes of RAM, and even the added benefit of 4 gigabytes of GPU for a better graphical experience. And now the cost comes out for those same 10 users, $60 per user instead of $284 per user per month. And yes, this is a real ratio. This is not an unusable number. We have a client using a 10 user to 1 host ratio of this exact machine size. This machine size is called NV8 ASV4. And so they use that exact machine size and a 10 to 1 host ratio for a call center of about 200 users. So this is something that a call center is using on a day-to-day basis for their workloads. So keep in mind that $60 is just for the cost of the host. We're not factoring in the cost of running the domain controller. So anything that you spin up in Azure, if you really want to understand what your cost is per user, you're going to have to take all those other costs, the cost of that virtual machine for the domain controller, the cost of that virtual network gateway that you're using to connect VPN to your office. You'd have to take that cost and divide it up per the number of users to get your true cost on top of what you're paying for the hosts. All right, so great. Now, instead of 10 hosts to support only 10 people, you could have 10 multi-session hosts to support 100 people and only be spending $60-ish in host cost per person. But now, how do you ensure the same 10 people get connected to the same host each time so that the desktop data is the same? If you have 10 people connected to AVD 01, how can you ensure that they get connected to that same one each time if there's 10 servers in there that they could get randomly connected to? And that's what we use something called FS Logics, as I was talking about earlier. So you would build out in Azure Files, something called Azure Files, this FSLogix environment, and you would configure AVD to store every user's desktop profile in FSLogix containers within Azure Files. This then keeps your user profile data, so your desktop documents, your pictures, your files, your settings, it's all stored in this location separate from the AVD host. And then whatever of the 10 AVD hosts the users gets connected to, their FSLogix profile container gets magically connected to that same host. So for the user, it's the same desktop every single time, even though the host in the background changes. All right, so great. So you have multi-session AVD hosts. We have these FSLogix user profile containers. Now you worry about the fact that you're going to have to try to keep 10 different virtual machines exactly the same updates, same programs. And what if a host goes bad and you need to build a new one? What if your company expands and you need to add another 10 hosts? Are you going to have to manually build and prepare and maintain each of these hosts individually every single time? Now, that's probably when you're going to want to use a golden image system. So you would build yourself a new virtual machine, you install all the programs, updates, and settings you want on it, and you build out something called an image gallery, and you run through the sysprep process, and you capture that VM as a golden image that's stored in the gallery. Now, every time you build a new virtual machine for your host pool, you can use that golden image that has all of your settings and your applications on it already. So good. You have a way to duplicate your existing systems if you grow or you need to replace something, but you're still stuck with the dilemma of having to update each of the existing hosts each month or establish a process of just updating a golden image, capturing and deploying new hosts every month. And deploying new hosts every month, that if you find a way to automate it, that could be a pretty decent way of handling it. All right, so we actually have a really good Azure architecture going on here. You have your AVD host, FSLogix, you have golden image. Things are looking pretty good. And then you realize you have 10 virtual machines running 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, but your 100 users that only work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., sometimes a few people work after hours, and they only work Monday through Friday, even though a handful maybe work sometimes on the weekends. That means that this environment is generating cost even when it's not needed. So what do you do about it? Well, now you want to figure out a system of auto scaling. You want to shut down hosts in the evening, after hours, and for the weekends, but you want to make sure they're also turned back on and ready to be connected in the mornings, during the weekdays, and you want to keep at least one around for anyone that needs to get to their virtual desktop after hours or on weekends. And if you can build the right auto scaling plans to do this effectively without causing issues for your users, such as accidentally not having enough hosts on when all 100 people try to connect in the morning, then this auto scaling should drive your cost per user down even more. Although now we do have to configure the cost, or we have to consider the cost of FSLogix file storage, of the image gallery, our image VM, our auto scaling systems. So there are additional costs now that we have to factor into all of that. So here you've built this wonderful Azure Virtual Desktop architecture, but it's a lot of moving pieces. You have to maintain that container storage, that auto scaling system, the image process, the 10 plus AVD hosts that are running applications and services that need regular updates and maintenance, and not to mention the expected load of typical user support, because virtual desktops need support just like laptops and desktops do. Users don't change. They're always going to have things that they need help with. Technology is always going to have some type of blip at some point, and someone's need to address it and take a look at it. And so now you're going to have to factor in the added labor and strain on your IT department, whether that consists of 1 or 20 people. And if you're like most organizations, your existing IT department already had their hands full. You were already full of doing support for existing applications and maintaining servers and various IT projects. And you don't have the time to become Azure and Cloud VDI experts. Now, don't get me wrong, Azure Virtual Desktop is still 100 times more user-friendly at setting up than any of those other VDI environments that you try to build yourself. AVD can really help you do it, but there's still a lot of complexity, a lot of moving pieces. And so that brings us to SafariDesktops. That's our AVD as a service solution, where you don't have to build virtual networks and maintain a secondary domain service location, or build Azure files or AVD workspaces, host pools or app groups. You don't have to build and maintain golden images or come up with an automated deployment method to manage all your AVD hosts at once. You don't have to build an auto-scaling solution or become Microsoft certified Azure experts or take on extra burden of maintaining and supporting the environment. We bring our Azure Solutions architecture and administration expertise around virtual desktops. And we take our talented and high quality solution support team made of real engineers, and we have partnered with an absolutely incredible powerhouse of a company called Nerdio for an Azure orchestration and automation technology that are second to none to provide you with an automated, managed, and supported AVD as a service solution. We take on all of the moving pieces, and we even take on the cost risk. So instead of paying monthly, all these pieces that you spun up and they're all generating an hourly cost, instead of paying for all of those resources on a monthly basis, we take on that cost and you pay a per user per month price. So what does that mean for you? That means, what if auto scaling breaks and all 20 servers stay on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for an entire month, and there's an extra $3,000 more Azure cost generated that month than there was supposed to be? That's on us. We absorb that cost. You still pay the agreed upon per user per month price. Or what if someone accidentally spun up a virtual machine 5 times the size of what it should be? They accidentally spun up a supercomputer in Azure. That's expensive. We are confident on our skills and our abilities and our orchestration and automation tools to keep the environment running at a cost it needs to be to meet that per user per month rate that we've agreed upon. With that said, I'd like to introduce Will from Nerdio. When we were building this service, Will was the first person from Nerdio we came into contact with, and that really led us into this amazing partnership.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me here, Jeremy. I got to say, the way that you just explained all of the pieces that get built and need to be maintained was very succinct and accurate. There might actually be a couple more pieces that you probably didn't want to dive too deeply into the technology on, but I think that was really great. Yeah, and so again, I'm super excited to be here. As Jeremy said, my name is Will Ominsky. I am the Vice President of Sales for our MSP business here at Nerdio. If you're not familiar with us, we are a global software company. We've been around for really on our own for about 5 years or so since we started, and been working with Jeremy and the Safari Micro team for quite a while. So in terms of the scale and scope that Nerdio has, we have well over 4 million virtual desktop users under management with our software. And that gives us a unique perspective and ability to be able to predict what's changing, what could be a potential issue in the future. And that really helps our key partners like Safari to be able to predict, those needs and mitigate the risk. And that's what I think is so great about their solution for anybody considering it. You are shifting risk and cost, right, and a bunch of work over to somebody else, so they have to worry about that at night, and you can just focus on your business, right? If you're a law firm or you're a financial firm or whatever your business is, you can focus on that core business and at a very good price point, not have to worry about your technology. I just know when I get up in the morning, I make my coffee, I brush my teeth, and I sign in and I get my job done. And then at the end of the day, I go home. And I think in our partnership, that really brings a strong solution to any organization considering this. I mean, things that we do at Nerdio, we help influence and bring over somewhere around 300 to 400 new customers into Azure with this specific solution Jeremy talked about every single month. And so that's why I think Safari has also been able to lean on us, where we see the scope and scale on a global level, where they can take the learnings that we have and implement them, for whatever size company you might be considering this. The other thing that we look at, is helping out with new features. Microsoft and the solution they've built is absolutely amazing, but they are building things for the whole world, right? And you are a business that has your own unique needs and your own unique considerations. And so we can kind of see where there might be gaps or things Microsoft hasn't brought out yet, and we can develop features for that. In a typical year, we develop over 100 new features to help support that. I'm struggling with this, or how else can I reduce my cost, or get performance to be better, or solve this challenge of single sign-on, or something like that. And so that's really the value that we bring. And we work as an extension of the Safari team. So they have an extremely deep bench. They have some incredible people like Jeremy himself, our resident trainer and LinkedIn expert related to Azure. So we love working with him. And from our perspective, you're in great hands in letting Safari and Jeremy and his team kind of take over that risk for you at a very predictable monthly cost.
Thank you, Will. I become a big fan of Nerdio, and I really enjoy our partnership we have. I'm kind of known in Safari Micro as probably the Nerdio ambassador. Really got to know these guys, and I've been got to be a part of their partner advisory board, and they really do take great input. So, the product that they help us bring in the automation side of things, it's constantly getting better. I haven't seen a company bring new improvements after someone suggested something at such a rapid rate. Somebody could say something one month and it's in the product live the next month. And so that's the type of power that you get with when we're automating and building all these environments. It's constantly improving, and so you're constantly getting a better Azure Virtual Desktop solution as time goes on because of our partnership with Nerdio.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jeremy. I think anybody thinking about Azure in general, Azure Virtual Desktop, it is something that needs tender care and feeding every single day, week, and month. It's not something that you just want to set and forget. And really, it's to your benefit as the users consuming the service, because if you do a good job or have a good partner to do that tender care and feeding, you will see improvements every single month instead of that old laptop that you've been using for 3 years that's progressively getting slower and slower and slower. So yeah, you don't have to live in that world anymore.
Exactly. Um, so yeah, it's because of really all the things we said, because of our own experience in Azure Virtual Desktop and um, Azure architectural experience, administration experience that we have, our service engineer support experience that we have, and these automation tools that Nerdio has built and partnered with us on, we can confidently, and this is what I say to people all the time, every time I talk about this, is we're pretty confident we can build it better. We can build an Azure Virtual Desktop for you that's better, faster, and more affordable than you could build yourself. Because there is a lot of work that goes into it. And as Will said, there are pieces that I left out because it does get even more complex. I do cover some of those more advanced things in videos on YouTube. You can find that it's out there if you really do want to build your own Azure Virtual Desktop environment. But why? What if somebody can build you a car for a reasonable price, why would you spend 5 times as much trying to build a car yourself when you're not the expert in it? And so that's what we're looking at Azure Virtual Desktop here. We want to provide you a fully automated, fully supported, fully managed virtual desktop experience through Azure Virtual Desktops that you don't have to worry about the cost risk, and you don't have to worry about the management and support of it yourself. You can just enjoy the benefits of it at a rate that was probably more affordable than if you were to have built it yourself. With that said, I want to also introduce Chris Day. He's our VP of Technical Services. If you're interested in any of this, Chris is going to talk about how you can engage us further in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. Great information. We really appreciate you putting this together. And Will, thank you for jumping on as well. Yeah, everyone, please reach out to your Safari Micro account manager. They all know what we're doing here, so they can help you get this started. We're happy to do a private meetings for anybody and kind of do this over again if you would like on in a private meeting with your executive team or with the rest of your IT team. You let us know. If you don't have a Safari Micro rep, feel free to reach out to Jeremy or I on LinkedIn, or you can send me an email. It's my email is chris.day@safarimicro.com. So feel free to reach out. We're here to help. So Jeremy, thanks again. We'll let some time for questions. So if anybody has any questions, let's start there.
There's a chat and a Q&A section here. Let me look at them both. One thing I do want to share is, at least at this moment in time, we're not on any type of contract basis, so we're not going to try to lock you into a 10-year agreement or something with us. It's month-to-month basis, and we make it very easy to work with us, especially at a POC type level. So if you want to start with 10 people, we want to spin up one host with 10 people on them for the first month and see how it works for you. See if we really do what we say. You can do that, and at the end of the month, you're like, I hate it. We'll remove it. We'll walk away. Bygones be bygones. If you love it, you're like, I want to stick my whole organization on it. We can scale it rapidly from there. So it's a question: how does the prevention of screen mirroring from a compromised device work? So the technology that Microsoft has built in is from a Windows side. It's something that developed from remote desktop services that they built into Azure Virtual Desktop. So it's hiding it from the Windows OS essentially itself. And so you can, any screen software that's installed inside Windows itself, it just can't see that screen. It's invisible to it. They have included a new security feature too, that say somebody took a photo outside of Windows, say somebody was looking over your shoulder at the screen and took a picture of it, they have a watermarking feature too that you can enable, so you can kind of track who took that photo and what person they were looking over, who might be compromised. So they're also adding additional security features around that ability. But yeah, that prevention of screen mirroring is something that's done at the OS level. Any other questions? Is that extra cost? No, that's a native feature in Azure Virtual Desktop. So everything that we mentioned security-wise here, as far as locking down, hiding clipboard, locking down the ability for information to be brought in or out of the virtual desktop. That's all native functionality for Azure Virtual Desktop. That's something we can help set up. There's no extra cost in that. Where you're going to look at extra cost is probably in the confidential computing arena, where you have to build some highly locked down virtual desktop. There's a lot of security considerations there in the encryption side of things. So there's going to be a little bit more of probably more of a setup cost more than a running cost, and just making sure that those virtual desktops are set up locked down correctly. But yeah,
Jared, just to add to that, I mean, we can implement other things like if you're running conditional access policies, things like that. So that could be another added cost if licensing wise with Microsoft 365, if you're not running something like a business premium or M365 E5 or E3. And you want to do conditional access or advanced multi-factor authentication, that stuff's all available, but that would be an extra cost. But that's not necessarily a function of AVD itself or Safari desktops. But all that could be integrated as well.
And when we come up with a agreed upon per user per month pricing, that includes not only all the virtual desktop side, but all the licensing aspect of accessing the virtual desktop. Microsoft does require some type of license for accessing a virtual desktop. If you have Microsoft 365 licensing already, some of them like the Business Premium and E3 and E5 SKUs, Microsoft 365 E3 and E5 have that virtual desktop license is already a part of it. So then we'll leave that out of our per user per month pricing, so we can come down even more on our pricing because you're already paying for that licensing. But go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was just gonna say that brings up a great point in that if you've ever wondered what that Microsoft Windows E3 or E5 license is attached to some of your licensing, like Business Premium or M365 E3 or E5, this is what it's for. It's for VDI, for AVDs, almost specifically. So that is what that license is for. We've gotten a lot of questions in the past. Can you install that license on a desktop or a laptop? No, but it is absolutely available to use and can save you a few dollars on your AVD. Looks like there's a follow-up question there, Jeremy, as well.
Yeah, so you showed multiple hosts that get assigned and via FS logics for user data. Is a live session transferable? I wish. Unfortunately, no. With Azure Virtual Desktop at this time, there is no live migration of the current session. So at most, you have to sign out and sign back in. So if we need people to transfer hosts, and especially if we worked maintenance on a particular host, we'll tell the users that are connected to it, like, hey, sign out and then sign back in, and that gets them connected to another host, same profile. But unfortunately, there's no way to kick them off that host with their active session, like if they were in the middle of running a batch job, and for that to continue running as it gets connected to a new host. A lot of the program stuff that's running, in the active memory of the host itself. That's not just data that's running in the profile. So even though the FS Logic profile gets attached to a new host, the stuff that's happening live in the memory of that particular host can't switch to another host on the fly, unfortunately. All right. I think we're at 11:30. I don't see any other questions. Again, feel free, if you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn or send us an email. Happy to answer those questions. Also happy to set up more private demos of it. And then again, if you want to look at a small POC to see how it works in your environment, and we can have all those discussions. We try to size things per your workload. You showed a live example for a call center with 10 users, 28 gigabytes of RAM. Is that realistic? 20 for 10 users? Windows at minimum needs 4 gigabytes each. So that's the beauty of multi-session technology and Azure Virtual Desktops is, yeah, a lot of people have their heads wrapped around the minimum requirements of running Windows on a physical computer for them. So yes, there is a minimum amount for running virtual machines with Windows, but with multi-session technology, you have multiple users created on that running virtual machine, and not all of them are doing like the maximum CPU usage at all one time. And so, yeah, 10 users, that was a realistic. We worked with the client to find a realistic ratio for them. If 10 users didn't work out, we would adjust that. We would stick it down to 9 users per host. But 10 was the magic number for them, where everyone could work comfortably without any issue. And that could save them some money versus if we stuck less people. And when we draw out proposals, and that's what I was getting to right before that question, is how we do proposals is we give you a questionnaire and we ask the workloads that you're going to be running in Azure Virtual Desktop. And we propose different ratios. Here's what it would look like if you had 9 users per host of this size, 8 users per host of this size, 15 users per host of this size, give you some different cost aspects to work with you. That way, in that first month, usually that first month looks like testing those scenarios. If at midway through the month you go, I don't think this is going to be enough, all right, let's adjust to a different ratio. We already priced it out in that proposal standpoint. And so we can do that on the fly. It's not like our entire rebuild. We can resize easily. That's the beauty of the Microsoft Cloud of Azure. And so we do really find what works for you in your situation. Another client, they were using that kind of 10 to 1 ratio, and they wanted a higher ceiling. Every once in a while, they had an application that was kind of CPU bursting intensive. So they wanted a higher ceiling overall. So we doubled the size. We gave them an NV32, NV16. And so they had twice the power, twice the CPU, twice the RAM for everyone. And we stuck double the amount of users. So the ratio was essentially still the same, but they had a higher resource ceiling overall for each individual users, and that does make a difference as well. So again, that's part of this Azure Virtual Desktop as a Service. Is we really work with you to find what's going to work for your organization. All right, want to thank everybody for attending this, and again, reach out if you have any questions. Will, thank you again so much for joining. Chris, thank you as always. I appreciate you guys. All right.
Thanks, everybody.